Hello and welcome to ShePack. I'm your host, Lenice Wolf, and today I'm joined by Lauren Magistro, a ICF-certified leadership coach and founder. She specializes in helping high-achieving women leaders conquer imposter syndrome, and she embraces authentic leadership. With her expertise in building high-performing teams and her role as VP of Customer Success at Tubular Labs, she guides women to thrive in their careers and lead with heart and authenticity. In today's episode, we're discussing authentic journeys to success. Lauren, welcome to ShePack, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here, Lenice. Thank you for having me. And I'm really pumped for this conversation we're about to embark upon.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so you went from a VP to leadership coach. Can you give us some background on your career path?
Yeah, of course. So I have been full-time in my coaching business working on helping leaders develop for the last almost 2 years now, coming up on 2 years in July. And prior to that, I was a VP of Customer Success and had spent the last kind of 15 years or so leading teams, leading high-performing teams in various different startups in San Francisco. So I have spent my corporate career in kind of sales teams, customer success, client services, account management type of teams. And now I work primarily with women who are also in go-to-market roles in kind of tech startups and helping them overcome many of the things that I myself kind of had struggled with or found challenging earlier in my career.
Yeah, I love that. Now, as you start to reflect on your journey from VP to now certified coach, what were some of the pivotal changes or challenges, and realizations that motivated this transition?
Yeah, I think for me, I myself, when I was a director, I actually went through my own coaching experience and kind of had a lot of personal transformation through a coaching program that I did as a client. And from that journey and kind of that experience, I really did kind of a 180 in terms of my own confidence and ability to really show up in the way I wanted, both in my career and in life. And after that, I had a ton of tools and resources and things that I had learned that had been just massively impactful for myself. And I had this desire to really want to share those things with others, and particularly found a group. I helped co-found a women's ERG at my company at the time, and had taken a lot of the things that I learned from my coaching experience myself and shared that in a session, the Women's ERG, kind of our inaugural workshop that we did on how to tackle feeling overwhelmed. And after that session, I just felt so energized and excited about being able to facilitate and share these resources with people that I kind of took those little breadcrumbs of like what was energizing me and what was feeling really fun and exciting, and I followed them. So I decided to explore coaching myself. After I signed up for a weekend course, I just felt it was so purposeful and like it was really what I was meant to be doing. So in terms of kind of that realization, I think going back to your question, I think having that realization really planted the seed in me that that's something I really wanted to do. And from there, I spent the next 2 years or so finishing up all the training and certifications and kind of putting the pieces in place so that I would be able to do this full time, but doing a lot of that while I was still kind of full time in my corporate role that I had helped me do that in a way that felt kind of sustainable, and it would be like a smart way to go about making that transition.
Now, it has to be like a complete mindset shift from going from corporate leadership to entrepreneurship. So what was that like? And what advice would you give to others who are really contemplating a similar path?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest shift is really going from that employee mindset to taking on kind of an owner or a CEO mindset. And I mean, my whole life, I had been an employee. I've always had a salary and a W-2, with benefits. And so I think that was a big shift in not working for somebody else anymore, and having some of those built-in structures that come along with that was definitely challenging to navigate. But I think being able to shift your own mindset to being able to define I am the CEO now, and what are the things that I need to be thinking about in terms of kind of my strategy, who I'm looking to support, who are my ideal clients that I think I can really impact. And working through a lot of that, I think helped me be able to make that shift. And then a couple other things that kind of, as I was thinking about this question, is really thinking about what your values are. And for me, I think I was able to kind of unlock and uncover my purpose and my why through coaching. And that helped me to decide that that's something I really wanted to do. But I also know I have other values, other things are important, like security and safety and knowing, that I have a runway to be able to do that. So putting those different pieces in place, like as well as honoring the purpose and the value, is important for me to be able to do that and to be able to make that shift kind of smoothly. So I think in terms of like advice for others, if that's something you're contemplating, I think for me, the process of doing that, is important to be saving money so that I felt like I had enough of a runway to be able to really explore this without feeling like I was going to be really having a ton of pressure to reach a certain level of revenue, within a short amount of time. And then also starting to build the business while still being in a full-time job, I think helped create some overlap there. And just creating a plan and kind of starting to build momentum before you go into that full-time, I think is what I would advise others if you're contemplating that.
Yeah, I really like the financial planning piece that you spoke to, because I think oftentimes, like if we're being forced because of money and you don't have that runway that you had spoke to, it's going to force you to go probably take a job that you didn't put as much kind of intentionality to create your life and make it purpose driven. So I think that's really sound advice.
Yeah.
Now, So, but as part of your coaching, I mean, you help to, high achieving women leaders conquer things like imposter syndrome. And I feel like sometimes with imposter syndrome, you feel like you have to be somebody that is just not yourself. So was there ever, a point within your journey where, when you were embracing authenticity over conformity, and how did that, affect your approach in terms of leadership?
Yeah, I remember actually like a very distinct piece of feedback I got once kind of early in my management time that I was managing people, which was that I might care too much about people. And I remember really taking that to heart and kind of, it made me question myself a little bit and kind of made me think, oh, do I need to like change this thing about me in order to like take on board, this feedback. But I think what I realized over time is like really actually embracing the fact that I care a lot about my people actually helped me to build like super engaged teams that were very loyal because they felt like very valued and like I was truly invested in them and invested not just in their role at that company, but like invested in them as people and wanting them to be successful and helping them achieve the goals that they had. I think realizing that was a superpower of mine, I think was an example of kind of like being able to embrace these things about myself, which were truly authentic to how I want to show up just in the world and in life. And I think being able to embrace something like that, while also like I realized that feedback was probably more just about like being able to be detached from things and not being so consumed, by like if you care so much, then every little thing might affect you. And so like being able to have boundaries and things, I think is really maybe what the intent of that feedback was. But I think realizing that the way I care about people is actually something that was really valuable to my leadership is an example of that. And I also think about, sometimes when I had like a lot of that feeling of imposter syndrome and feeling like I should know everything was maybe another example of where I felt like I should like conform to a certain way of being, like I should be different, I should know more, or I should have all these answers. And I feel like there was like a big shift that happened for me when I kind of embraced a mindset of like not needing to know everything, like that not actually being a realistic thing to expect of yourself, and being able to embrace like curiosity or being able to say like, well, here's what I do know. And then like taking more of like a learning mindset versus like a feeling like you need to have all the answers.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because all of us, everything that you had listed out, I know that those have been things that I have struggled with as well. How else did you feel like it shaped your leadership style going through those pieces of imposter syndrome? And what role really did coaching play in overcoming it?
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been somebody who sets a high bar. Like I'm a hard worker and I hold myself definitely to a high standard, which I think that definitely comes through in my leadership, both in terms of what people could expect from me. Like if, I will deliver things consistently at that level. And so like people kind of could come to expect that from me, but also in terms of what people like what I would expect of my team as well. And I think thinking about, I've seen another coach that I follow on LinkedIn, she talks about how leadership is really like being human with standards. And I think that definition kind of applies to how I think about it as well. But I think what I started to realize is like that all of that's well and good, but I feel like my kind of imposter gremlin was amplifying itself with perfectionism. And I think for me, that kind of translated in this need to feel like I was doing everything perfectly or like getting it all just right. And that might get like co-opted into that like high bar, hard worker. And I feel like over time I started to realize like that was actually like driving a lot of anxiety for me. And I think a lot of women I work with now like kind of have that same experience. I think coaching just really helped me realize a lot of those like thought errors of thinking like you need to do it this way or else. And kind of undoing that patterning that was kind of keeping me stuck in that anxiety loop. I think, I gained a lot of tools that really helped me unlock a new way and really helped me unlock a lot more confidence in believing I was like the right person for the job and the best person, to be there. And that you can have strengths and have all these assets and still have opportunity to grow and to learn new things too. And I think that's where that perfectionism can kind of get in the way of that, because it's more of like a fixed mindset of thinking that, you're not going to be valuable unless you are doing things like exactly perfectly. So I think for me, they're kind of linked, those two.
Well, and I think being aware is like half of the step. I think you have to be aware of your kind of blind spots of things that you're doing and you don't even realize and they're not really serving you. I mean, like as you think back, were there like specific tools that you thought like, oh, I'm keeping this with me because it's helping with that perfectionism? Was there any tools that really stood out to you that you even leverage today?
Yeah, I think one of the things that really was helpful for me was realizing that like everything you do you can just set a goal of like, this is just a first draft. And I feel like a lot of times what would hinder my ability to get things done more quickly was feeling like it had to be perfect. Like the first version of it had to be like great. And then I feel like once I shifted my expectations of like, actually the goal here is just to create a messy first draft and then you can edit it. That is something that I feel like was really a helpful tool for me. Another one I think is helpful, which I also share with clients, is shifting from like having everything need to be A+ work to making, the goal of like everything should be like a B+. And then maybe you save your excellent A+, efforts for really key important things, but you kind of make the standard a little bit less so that you can get things out more quickly and you just waste less time like obsessing over details that maybe don't matter as much.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. And now we were talking and you were telling me that growing up, you were really active in sports. And so how's your experiences in sports and even other activities contributed to your resilience and leadership abilities?
Yeah. So I was a runner and I did cross country and track in high school. And I think in looking back on that now, I can clearly see there's like so much overlap in that sport for me specifically, but in most sports, I think a lot of things overlap with how you show up at work or in teamwork or collaboration. But I think for me with running, it's a lot of focusing on a goal and then putting in a lot of effort over time, like consistently, so that at the end, when you show up to the race, you can perform at the level you want. But a lot of it is not glamorous. And it's like, it's like, do I really want to show up every single day of the summer to go run, and on the days when it's hard or you just don't feel like it, you do it anyways. And then when you see the result in like, you are like able to like get a personal record or a personal best in a race, that you can see the result of that. And that's all like builds up over time, I think is a good learning that, I could apply to times in corporate roles and in my business now. It's like doing little bits every day is going to lead to something kind of bigger in the end. It's sort of that planting seeds analogy. But yeah, I feel like it showed me like the value of hard work, also of resilience, and like also, when things don't go your way and you have a bad race or just, something went wrong, and being able to like adapt to that and being able to move forward, I think is helpful in terms of leadership.
Well, and I think too, like some things, and I know, for myself and what I've heard from others, that I think as you are progressing in your career, you start to strive for this like high achievement and in often cases becoming a people pleaser. How has that impacted, your life in ways that might be challenging or even unexpected?
I think especially in a corporate role, there's a lot of demands on you and there's a lot of requests of you. And, in some companies more than others, like I feel like there's sort of an assumption of like, we pay you, so then we can like ask you to do whatever we want. And especially I think as you move into a middle management role, like I feel like middle management, in my opinion, is some of the toughest roles in companies because you're having to do your own work probably still. You're having to manage your team, and you're also having to like translate things coming from above you, but you have very little say in them, but you need to like still inspire your team. And so there's like just a lot of pressure, I think, on people. And so I think for me personally, I feel like I had been in a place where I was very accustomed to saying yes to most things, and like that was what, got me promotions and got me all the gold stars. And so I think as I grew in my leadership, though, I started to realize like, wow, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling overstretched and overcommitted. And so I think learning how to say no or how to negotiate, like by negotiate in this example, I mean, like if someone asks you to do something, your answer isn't either only yes or only no. Like there's probably some in between that you could kind of negotiate for, of when something could get done or what can and can't be done. And figuring that out was like, I think a really critical skill for myself. And then I think much of what I work on now with clients is figuring out that same thing as well. So that they can create better boundaries and not get to that place of burnout. But I mean, this is still a challenge. Like this is still something I work on every day and trying to get better at this. Just, I think, being socialized and growing up as women, like we're also like encouraged and taught to do that. And so I think undoing that patterning can be hard.
Well, I also think coaching is a huge strategy. Like if you don't have a coach, such an effective way that can help in things like preventing burnout and helping to set healthy boundaries. But what are other strategies that you've either used with yourself or you've shared with clients to help those things?
Yeah, a couple of ideas here. One that I love is thinking about how are you bookending your day? So how are you starting your day before you start work? And how are you closing out your day before you kind of turn off work? Because I think so many people, especially if you're working from home now or remotely, kind of hybrid, it's so easy for everything to just blend in from one thing to another. So I try to have like a clear morning routine. And then at the end of the day, I try to like clean off my desk, put things away, kind of tidy up before I close my laptop and leave. But I think thinking about how are you starting and ending is one thing that's helpful. Another thing I find is really helpful, if you're prone to just saying yes right away, when people ask you to do things or to help them with things, just start by buying yourself some time. Like, don't feel like you have to respond right away. Be like, oh, like, so it sounds like you're asking me to do this. Let me get back to you, or let me check my calendar. Let me confirm the other items I have right now, and then I'll let you know. But just saying something that will get you a little bit of space so that you can make a more kind of aligned choice rather than like sort of unconsciously committing to it. And I like to pair that with using my calendar. So if you put everything on your calendar and you buy yourself some time, you can kind of actually look at your calendar and be like, do I have the space to fit this in? If not, what would I need to move to be able to? And do I want to move that or not? So I think that can help you with not overcommitting right away. And then the last thing I also like to think about is like, what's a win-win? Like if they're asking for something and they need something from me, but I know if I say yes, I'll feel like overburdened or like I am overcommitting. And that's like a lose for me. So what's a win-win? Maybe it's I can do a smaller amount, or I can do it at a later time, or I can connect them with someone else who can, or, but like trying to figure out what's a way forward where we both can benefit.
Yeah, no, I think that's really useful. What I also like is like creating consistency and kind of a plan for how you start the morning, how you end, whether it's cleaning up your desk. Do you have guidance around hours? Like, how do you set boundaries with hours? Because I think a lot of the time, we think, oh, we have to start at 5 a.m. or we catch ourselves working till like 3 o'clock in the morning. And, what's helpful advice that you've either used for yourself or again with your clients?
Yeah, I think it's, part of it is being realistic with what are the demands of your time in the role that you're in. Like my role, I was a global VP. So I had teams in the UK, in France, in APAC, and in the US on bi-coastal teams. So I feel like the time zones were challenging to navigate, but I was like, if I am going to be able to give the EMEA team enough, attention, I need to be available in the morning because I'm in California and Pacific time. So I feel like I tried to block out my mornings to be available for calls that they were on or needed to be in. And then, and then that helped me to like figure out what times I was available to other teams. And also figuring out like when was I traveling to those offices and locations at what kind of cadence where they would get like more time and kind of physical presence. But I think figuring out like what is it that you are gonna, if there's any parameters circumstantially like that apply. And then I think like, it's just figuring out like what are your other commitments and other things that you want to be creating time and space for outside of work. Because sometimes if we think about saying yes to those things, it's easier to think about how do we say no to like some of the work demands. And so, prioritizing those other things first can help you in kind of thinking about time boxing work to fit in certain times as well. But I think maybe it just comes down to like how many hours a week are you kind of willing to work? And is that going to be aligned to the culture of the organization that you're in? And how can you kind of communicate those things to the team that you're working with too?
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. And the other point too of, plotting that on the calendar, it is very much integrating, because I know I've experienced very much in the past of just like, health and fitness. That always tends to be the one that goes to the wayside, but figuring out to not overcommit. So I think that's helpful. And slightly on that topic, I mean, we've been talking about coaching, and I know for me, coaching has been pivotal in my career transformation. Can you share your transformation experience, with a mentor? You kind of talked to getting coaching earlier in your career, and how did that have a significant impact in your career trajectory?
Yeah. So when I was in my first role as a director, I think that was a time where I just recall feeling an overwhelming amount of that imposter syndrome coming up. And I had shifted from an ad tech background into a software company, and came in at a point where there was like a lot of churn and there was a lot of pressure to have our renewal rates be higher and a lot of like urgency of like turning some things around. And so I felt like those things combined together, like just really made me feel like I like kind of an anxious mess. And so after kind of operating in that way for a bit of time, I actually decided like, okay, this is not really sustainable. And I think also things that had happened for me in my personal life also led me to feel like I'm just not feeling that fulfilled and that happy right now. And I don't I don't like that. And so I took action of starting to work with a coach, and I did a 6-month program where it was really around like rewiring your brain and understanding your thought patterns and learning how to apply some of these tools of like kind of thought work to all different aspects of your life, and not just like work, but, you know, really just building self-confidence and really being able to like deprogram some of those perfectionist kind of tendencies and people-pleasing tendencies. And for me, going through that experience was completely transformational. I think I did a 180. And I feel like after that, I was just so much more confident and like believing in myself. And I think that showed up in like, I was able to like ask for a raise. I was able to like I got promoted later on. And I was able to like really advocate for my team, or advocate for things that we needed on our team in order to be successful. And so I think all of those things kind of combined together to help elevate me into that VP role eventually. And they're kind of like these building blocks that I think really, you know, were empowering for me.
And after that 6-month mark, I mean, what value did coaching have for you after?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the value for me was just, I don't know, I feel like it was just the waking up and not feeling like anxious all the time anymore. But actually feeling like I had my own back. Like I had I kind of was like being my own best friend and talking to myself more positively, I think, in my head, and being able to, I feel like, just feel more confident that no matter what happens in my circumstances of life, that I knew I could, you know, still find fulfillment and joy and like, you know, the things that I knew I wanted. I feel like, and it just helped. Like I had no idea what coaching even was before that. So I think the value also had helped me just realize like, wow, this is like really powerful stuff. Kind of that personal development can be like really impactful, I think.
Yeah. And after that program, were you still meeting with a coach, or was it, you know, you invested in that 6-month period and really at that point had all the tools that you needed to succeed?
Yeah. So I didn't continue working with that coach in particular, but I've basically since then always had a coach of some form. So from there, I went into having a coach actually who I got access to through my job for leadership coaching. And then as I was going through my coach training, I had many different coaches that I worked with through that, and mentor coaches. Now I have a coach that's a business coach and a sales coach. So yeah, I think from there I was like hooked. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna need, this is part of my squad now.
Well, you'll get to a point. I feel like I think somebody was saying like, how many coaches do you have? I'm like, I don't know. I need a lifestyle coach. I need like a regular, I need like a fitness coach. And, you know, once you open up and see the value, then you just, you know, you can't get enough of them.
Yeah. I feel like a big part of the value is just the accountability and structure that you can get, and helping you, like somebody else who's holding your goal, like for you and with you, like it's just when you fall off or you get wobbly, like they're still there, like holding it for you. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. What insights would you offer to those that are just a bit hesitant to start coaching?
Yeah, I think if you are feeling stuck or unfulfilled or just less fulfilled than you would want to be, or maybe you're overwhelmed or anxious and you're kind of like curious or thinking that there's a better way, I feel like those are great signs that coaching might be really helpful for you. Or if you're kind of trying to DIY a bunch of stuff and you're kind of trying to piece things together and hobbling along and you're finding it really hard and heavy, then like I also think coaching could be really helpful in that scenario. And I think like the most massive kind of impacts that I hear back from people that I work with is just the increase in their confidence levels and their ability to feel like they can lead in a way that's authentic to them and just more fulfillment. So if those things are things you're like deep down, you're like, oh, I really wish I could have that. Like, then I would say coaching is probably a great thing to explore. And then I would say like the other benefits are more like monetary, like people like are getting raises or getting promotions or just able to step into new levels of responsibility and doing that with more ease and less burnout. So if any of those things are like, oh, I would like to have that, then I think starting to have some conversations with coaches and I think the key thing is just finding somebody who you really like gel with and who, who is like maybe farther ahead than you are now and can kind of help you get to kind of where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think adding on that, for those that they are ready. I mean, after this podcast, they are convinced, yes, actually, that's what I've been missing. Where's the best place? I mean, I would say number one, check out Lauren. But where's the best place to start, sourcing and figuring out where's the best place to look for a coach?
Yeah, I think, I know a lot of coaches who are really active on LinkedIn and who are using that as a platform for sharing content and kind of free content as well. Like I usually do free LinkedIn lives where I'll do kind of like mini trainings, or I do webinars as well. So looking for coaches who are maybe offering some content already, and you can start to see if those things like align to what your challenges are or what you're hoping to get, can be a great way to explore if somebody might be aligned to you or not. And then I think asking like in different kind of mentor networking groups, like, I think we met through Women in Revenue, and like groups like that are really helpful for kind of crowdsourcing for ideas as well. And then even just asking, if there's more senior level leaders who you admire and look up to, you could ask them for any recommendations too, because chances are if someone's at an executive level, like they've probably had access to some coaching at some point. And so they might have some recommendations as well.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Now, the last question that I will leave you with, my friend, is in a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
Such a good question. I really hope, I think my mission personally is to help other people feel less alone. And so I hope that I can help more women just unlock their own magic that they have within them. And really, by doing that, I hope that they benefit, number one, but that then every other person that they touch and that they impact or come in contact with, will benefit as well. So really thinking about this like ripple effect. And I think we'll all be better off if we can all be able to just tap into what makes us unique, what are our unique strengths, our superpowers, what are we like meant to be here to do? And the more we can all be leaning into that, I think the more fulfilled and happy we'll all be. And then, that just breeds more of that in the world.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a timely discussion. I was just on the phone with someone and she was telling me, hey, I never invested in coaching. And I'm like, you have to do it. So, I think from our conversation today, there's so many lessons of building awareness of maybe some of your blind spots, but I think also leveraging a village. It's part of like, there's only certain tools, tools that we have in our toolkit. And I think even from our conversation, there's so much that we can gain and grow from just by having coaching. So thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom. I encourage everybody to check out Lauren. I will make sure to include your information in the show notes. And as we wrap up today's session, let's remember that in supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and we break down barriers. So go out there, champion for your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape a future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.